And joining us now to discuss this further is Adam Savit, Director of the China Policy Initiative at America First Policy Institute. So good afternoon to you, Adam, as always. Intel CEO Lip Bhutan is reportedly due to visit the White House today, which follows President Trump's calling for his removal last week. And the Wall Street Journal reported this meeting is for Trump to get to better know Tan, his background, his commitment to the U.S. Do you think, is there potential for Trump to change his mind about calling for his removal?
I think there absolutely is potential, and that speaks to President Trump's style and character. I mean, let's look at this. The man is speaking to Vladimir Putin, even though he's had a lot of huge frustrations with him. He's open to meeting with President Xi of China. In fact, it's been reported that that's probably in the offing for the fall. So yes, I mean, he's called the CEO out, and certainly he has some significant problems, and it's been imparted upon Trump that there's major security concerns here. However, Trump is a man who always deals with personalities, and perhaps he can get Tan to also just sort of reform himself or come around on this and make certain assurances that may make a deal, or at least will calm the tensions between the two as people.
So in building to what you said about assurances, Tan actually said he has always operated within the highest legal and ethical standards. But the question remains, what is at stake here for U.S. national security if Intel's manufacturing capabilities were leaked to Chinese firms?
Well, those are your quote there. I'd call those weasel words, right? He didn't affirm or deny the accusation. He just said, generally, I follow the rules. But, as far as the national security concerns, it's always important to return to the concept of civil-military fusion. So that means that anything, any data, any information, any profits that go back to China from a Chinese corporation are immediately fused from a corporation to the PLA, the People's Liberation Army. There is no effective difference between the two. Now, regarding Intel itself, unfortunately, Intel has sort of fallen behind as a champion of the semiconductor world. So as far as U.S. chip production, what they would garner from Intel, unfortunately, they wouldn't garner very much because Intel is looking for investment. Intel sales have declined. In fact, one critique that's coming Intel's way is that they've gotten billions of dollars from the CHIPS Act back in the Biden administration, and they haven't put much of that to use, specifically in Ohio. A lot of people are upset in Ohio. They're supposed to build a large plant that's supposed to be productive by now. I think they've already dispersed $2 billion of the fund, and they haven't acted on it. So as far as Intel itself, Intel is under a lot of criticism from a lot of angles.
So I also wanted to get your reactions to a reported deal between NVIDIA and AMD and the U.S. government. So Trump confirmed that they'll pay a 15% fee on revenues from chip sales in exchange for export licenses to send certain chips to China. What do you make of this arrangement? Any thoughts you have?
What I make of it, it's classic Trump, and I understand the angle. It is a tariff of sorts. So, this huge trade that is going on in NVIDIA with massive, the largest market cap in the history of business, I believe, and he wants to get a certain piece of that action if NVIDIA is making those sales. But I don't think it really speaks to the national security concerns here with the H20 chip, which is not the most powerful chip. It was specifically made for the Chinese market, so it had certain limitations on it. It can't train AI systems, but it is very good at running AI, and that itself is a threat, the processing power to be able to run AI models. So this is a tariff and a trade question. It's not so much addressing the national security question.
Okay, so basically you don't see any national security concerns if NVIDIA were to sell these H20 chips to China. It would be totally fine.
No, I mean, that's completely debatable, and experts disagree on that because again, the H20s are meant to process data, and they are pretty good at that. So running an AI model, a chatbot that a user might use at home, it's not good enough probably to train models. But, another part of this discourse is whether if we cut off certain capabilities and processing power from China, is that going to spur them to develop their own domestic chip ecosystem and kind of supercharge that so they can get around the U.S. export controls? That's another concern. It's an incredibly complex, let's say, ecosystem here with different inputs and different exports. And there is arguments on the U.S. side as well, though, that yes, this H-20, this designated export to China, will not undermine security. And in fact, it was specifically made to be exported to China. And there was only a 3-month period recently where it was banned to go to China. And NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang personally intervened, spoke to President Trump, went down to Mar-a-Lago and reopened it. But yeah, there's mixed opinions. But generally speaking, folks in the U.S. are open to this export.
Okay, understood. So let's move on to another topic here too, CCP buying U.S. farmland and what's being done about it. So Adam, I understand in your article, your recent article, you list 3 primary ways in which the Chinese Communist Party has used gaps in regulation and enforcement to undermine our farm security. If you wouldn't mind, maybe perhaps you can walk us through those loopholes and how this impacts the U.S.
Thanks for the opportunity. Yes, I mean, the number one is reporting. Okay, if you don't know where the land is, how it's disposed, and how it's used, how can you address the national security concerns? So there's this measure called a FIDA, that's an anagram, at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. This was made way back in the 70s. So this reporting mechanism doesn't include certain geospatial aspects of reporting. There is no deterrent, effectively. The penalties are incredibly low. So that's 2 main issues there. The database is antiquated. It's impossible to use. So this will be upgraded under the USDA's Farm Security Action Plan, recently announced by Secretary Brooke Rollins. Number 2 is another acronym, CFIUS. That's the body that is supposed to screen incoming purchases of U.S. corporations that could affect national security. The viewers may know that from the acquisition of Nippon Steel. That went through CFIUS. So CFIUS is supposed to examine these agricultural land purchases from China and other adversaries and determine whether it's a threat to national security. In the past, unfortunately, CFIUS has failed. Either certain sensitive sites like military bases did not show up on their list. Famously, the Grand Forks Air Force Base in North Dakota is the worst example of this, where CFIUS was asked to evaluate a purchase by a Chinese corporation near that Air Force Base, and the Air Force Base didn't show up on CFIUS's list that they were allowed to investigate. So that's an example of bureaucracy that we're going to clear up now. And also, the Ag Secretary, in the person of Secretary Rollins, will now sit on the CFIUS board alongside the Treasury Secretary, the Secretary of State, the National Security Advisor. So there will be an agricultural angle onto these questions. And finally, research security. Intellectual property theft. Our universities, unfortunately, are still open to Chinese researchers who come in, many of them associated with the CCP or otherwise have nefarious aims. There was a huge story in June that saw some researchers at some CCP national researchers at the University of Michigan who brought in a fungus, a pathogen, which had the potential to destroy crops in the United States, everything from wheat to corn. They're able to smuggle this in. Thankfully, they were caught. We don't know how much of this is going on.
Okay, just real quick, one last question, Adam. What is China doing exactly or with Chinese purchases of farmland in the U.S.?
Well, what they're doing, some people point out the ultimate, or rather the amount of the land is relatively not that much. We're talking 500,000 acres, which sounds huge, but in the context of farmland, it's not that much, quote unquote. However, any acre of land that the CCP has access to is a platform for surveillance and sabotage. And unfortunately, recently, in recent months, we have 2 very graphic illustrations of what a dedicated adversary can do with small acreage. And that would be number 1, in Russia, the Ukraine was able to forward place these drones, which were able to fly onto Russian Air Force bases and destroy billions of dollars worth of planes and equipment. Number 2, Israel was able to place on the ground operatives who were able to place drones on open land, which also participated in the destruction of Iranian missiles and aircraft. So this can be translated to the United States, and you don't need 1 million acres. You can do it with 10 acres, 20 acres, 30 acres, etc.
Well, all right, Adam. Thank you for shedding light on this important issue. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.